Which brings me then to the roles of the women in the film. What kind of perspective or kind of message or even purpose do the women have in Billy's life?
Debbie, I feel she is a huge influence on Billy. She's the one that tells him that Wayne Sleep is an athlete and that it's okay to be a ballet dancer. And then he then mirrors that when he's talking to his father. He then mirrors her exact words. So it shows us what influence she has on him. And during that scene where she talks about Wayne Sleep and the fact that ballet, it's okay for him to do ballet, that's the same scene where she's completely ignoring and oblivious to the police officers that are lining up on the street. So in a way, she doesn't back down to authority. And I feel like Billy absorbs that message subconsciously and then is able to express himself in the way that he wants to without conforming, without accepting what an authority says.
On a different note, whilst we were doing that presentation, an idea that we all came up with was all of the female characters, so the mother, the grandmother and Mrs. Wilkinson as well as Debbie, they are all artists in their own way. So the mother used to play a piano, the grandmother used to dance as well. And so, no male character has influenced Billy in the same way that the females have. And
I would actually have to disagree with you there because this is where I want to talk about Michael.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Let's go.
Okay, so
challenge.
We're first introduced to Michael in this scene where Billy's banging the door and he's about to go into the boxing ring. And I think it's very purposeful that Michael's introduced so early on in the film. It's around 5:49. I think his placement so early on is because Dowdry wants the audience to be aware of the influence that Michael has in Billy's life. He's immediately set up as a nonconformist. Whilst Billy enters the boxing hall, Michael decides to stay outside in the open air and the open light. So, we see Billy aggressively banging the door. And I just want to point out as well that when he goes into the boxing ring, it's quite dark, it's low-key lighting, whereas the outside is quite bright. And I think that's juxtaposing the expression here. Michael is free to express himself, whereas Billy isn't at that point just yet.
Can I add to that? Not to sort of in some ways to refute what you said before. I do think absolutely you're right where Michael does influence Billy on an artistic level, not sure, but definitely on a social level where he is challenging gender stereotypes. Michael, absolutely, you're right there, has influence, if that makes sense.
Do you think that Michael gives Billy permission or the access in order to be able to say, oh, this is different, I'm not judging, and so therefore people don't have to judge me as well?
Definitely. Michael holds up the mirror to Billy to say, this is me, and I'm not apologising for it, and you can be yourself too.
I think they both, in some ways, give each other permission because going back to the gym scene on Christmas Eve, I think it is, where they're dancing in the gym and Michael says, teach me ballet. Like in some ways that he, there's that reciprocation there of, not being judged and sort of doing what they want to do in that gym without that social pressure and without judgment. So I think they both replicate and mirror each other. I was going to sort of add to, again, come back to the rubric with the concept of gender and just sort of, the rubric does ask us to, reconsider, and it says here, invite the respondent to see the world differently, challenge assumptions, ignite new ideas, or reflect personally. And I think that's, gender is such an easy one to go to because the film has this, blatant overtone as to how it questions, Dowdry questions what is gender and what does it mean to be masculine, what does it mean to be feminine, what does it mean for a male to do, to perform ballet. And I think that's coming back to this concept of anomalies, paradoxes and inconsistencies. Billy is a little bit of an anomaly arguably so is Michael, because they are not non-conformists in their society.
Both of those characters allow us to challenge assumptions about what it is to be masculine, and it also ignites new ideas about how we can have the audacity to be ourselves, because Michael is himself and Billy is very much influenced by that. So I wanted to talk about the next time we see Michael, and that's in that classroom setting, and he playfully hits Billy, and often Billy is seen following Michael, and you can see here the reason why he pauses, looks at himself in the mirror and takes a breath, a deep breath. I think that's very purposeful, because he is aware that he's now entering into a new space. And it takes courage to do that.
And I just want to note the white that he's wearing, because I know that's something that he goes through between white and blue, and here he's in that white, which I find interesting because he finishes on the white in that final scene. So
and previously, when we saw him and Michael, Billy was in his boxing gear, whereas now he's not. So he's like slowly stripping away what it means to be masculine. Even though the boxing gloves do appear later, it's showing that progression is non-linear and microcyclical. So it's a bit of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So we see him here, he takes this big deep breath because he knows he's about to follow Michael. And here we see them running, and the other boys run up the hill, but significantly they go on their own path. They take their own path. They scale, I think it's really interesting here that they scale the brick wall, because it really reminds me of Billy's angry tap dance, where he also scales the wall. And I feel like, back to your previous video about barriers, it's like they're scaling across the barrier. The bricks are kind of a symbol for conformity, like, you know, the song, Just Another Brick in the Wall. But Michael and Billy, they're not just another brick in the wall.
And I question, would it have been easier for them to just go up the hill, or them scaling that, side wall looks to me more challenging than, going up that hill? And what does that say about one's own journey and, the preference that we take it,
I really love that idea, because that's really interesting. It's not easier to scale the brick wall. It's harder. What's that saying about being who you are is hard in this world. But they choose, like, transformation, it's almost like you have to have challenge in order to transform.
For sure,
Like, you have to. So Billy here, he says, I'd look like a right dickhead. He's talking about ballet. And Michael says, I think you'd look wicked. So whilst other characters in the film see him as being a wanker, Michael says, you look wicked. And it kind of reminds me of this quote, the first defense against a culture that hates you is a person that loves you. And so Michael's authenticity acts as a mirror, whereby Billy feels free to show himself for who he truly is. The next scene I really wanted to talk about, and I think as well, after he says, I think you'd look wicked, there's a silence. And again, the silence is on purpose, and it signifies that Billy is hearing this message. He wasn't necessarily hearing what Michael was saying before, but now he's really absorbing it. Like, yes, I would look wicked. I don't have to listen to what other people say. I can go on my own path if I want to. The next scene I wanted to discuss with Michael in it is this scene, and this is one of my favourite scenes in the film, because Billy runs up to Michael's door, and Michael unapologetically, without explanation, opens the door in a dress. He doesn't say sorry. He doesn't even explain why he's wearing a dress. He just opens the door, and Billy says, what are you doing? And Michael says, nothing, I'm just dressing up. To him, it's just part of who he is. And he puts on lipstick, and at this point, Billy is still hesitant. He's still kind of looking around. Michael significantly opens the closet door, like he's himself, whereas Billy's still standing in the doorway. He's kind of half in, half out. But when he's got folded arms, but when he comes in, he lets Michael put the lipstick on him, and he asks Michael, do you think ballet dancing would be better than being a minor? So he's completely aware that he has to choose between these two polaric states. And Michael actually paradoxically says, I think you shouldn't bother because I'd miss you. So even though Michael acts as a force or a catalyst for Billy's self-expression, at the same time he still wants Billy around. So that's another paradox in the film.
That's deep.
Wow, that's actually really, really deep. Yeah. Can I bring it back to some film techniques, if that's okay?
Of course.
What I found was really interesting is that when Billy and Michael actually are having an argument about boxing, when they're in the classroom and just before they go on that cross country, when Billy takes that breath, every single time that they had a two-shot before he takes that breath in the mirror, there's always lines of separation between the two. They're always separate compositions. Whenever they have a conversation, you also get the left and right shot. It's only until you get to the dress where he opens the door, the lines of separation start up again. So after the mirror, they're actually in two shots and they're always composed together. So when they run under the bridge, when they run through the tunnel, they're shot together. It's only until this scene that they go back as a separate line. So they're always recomposed, and it's Michael that's in the mirror this time. So Michael is actually saying to Billy, I don't want you to go because I only have myself. Whereas Billy, when he looks in the mirror, he has Michael, but he thinks he only has himself.
Well, I think that's really interesting because when Billy does his angry dance, his tap dance, we see him on the roof and he pulls up his shirt, and significantly Michael is standing next to him on the roof and follows him. And it's almost, again, like Michael has just subconsciously influenced him to be himself. Michael's not reacting to his self-expression.
I think as well, sort of just coming back to natural human behaviour and inconsistencies, does Michael want Billy to succeed and do ballet? On some element, on some level, yes, but on some level, no. And I think that's a completely normal human experience. That's a normal thing. You want your friends to, simple example, when I was in high school, my friend wanted to move schools because the art school was way better. And a part of me was like, yeah, you really need to go there because that's where you belong. And then the other half was like, no, then I'd miss you. And I think that's just a natural human inconsistency in our thought process, in our minds. How much do we want people to succeed in, inverted commas? And then we're challenging ourselves, we're reflecting on ourselves as a person. Yeah, what actually motivates us as humans.
I think it allows us to reflect on our own friendships.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, and that weird thing of that when you develop relationships with other people and when they all have different relationships, the idea of we're balancing that sense of altruism and generosity and reciprocity, but at the same time trying to fight that human instinct of selfishness.
It's like, is it like, I suppose that relationship between Michael and Billy, is it a collective experience or is it an individual experience? And sort of just coming back again to the rubric. Sorry, guys.
I think it's collective in the sense that all suffering comes from attachment to expectations, attachment to people. If you think about Jackie's suffering, it's because he has an attachment to this expectation of his son becoming a minor and being masculine. Or other characters in the film, it's because they have an attachment to people.
I think that, yeah, that's definitely right. And to add on to that, once Billy, sort of, I guess, in some ways, once the town finds out that he's auditioning, there's a scene where he's walking up the street past, I think it's a bus stop, and then one of the
boxing coach.
The boxing coach, the boxing coach, he goes, "Oh, good luck, Billy," kind of thing. And isn't that a fascinating little moment there where we're now before
shifting?
Yeah, before, like, in some ways Jackie would have been embarrassed that his son is, becoming a ballet dancer because what will other people think? Well, now that, people don't care, they're actually supportive about it, And
there's that beautiful moment where Jackie finds out Billy has gotten into the ballet school, and he runs up the hill and he says, he's done it, like he got in, and he's smiling. And it's just such a beautiful message that if somebody really loves you, they will accept you for who you are. And they will come around.
It's a strange paradox with Jackie because everything he does before then, he thinks he's doing it because he loves Billy. I want the best for my kid, so I want him to be strong, work hard, become a man, and then become a miner, earn a living, take care of the family, take care of Nan, and all that kind of thing. But when he goes through that transformation and he sacrifices basically the memory of his wife, and by pawning her jewelry so he can get him to the ballet school. And it's strange because he still wants what's best for his son. He goes, oh, I've sacrificed this so my son can go to the school. And he's even questioned by the headmaster, saying, he's like, are you really behind him? It's like, of course he is. Of course. But for an audience, we've been presented with this idea of Jackie still loves his kid, but he was doing it the only way he knows how until Miss Wilkinson comes along and says, this is another way you can actually love your kid and give him this opportunity.
It was a conditional love in a way, because he sees Billy as a reflection of himself, and it is only when he's able to step away from that and see Billy as a separate spirit, as a separate entity, that he's able to nourish his desires, and he's able to allow him to and support him. Because we were discussing this in class, and I think that's why Tony is so angry, because Tony follows the father, follows Jackie. Tony becomes the miner. But if you look at the early scenes, Tony also values expression, because you see him when he's vacuuming trying to play the guitar, and you see him with his records and his love for music. But he has to go into this masculine world, and I feel like that's where a lot of his anger comes from, because he can't express himself, because he follows the path.
Yeah, it's almost like what's his name? He was on Q&A. He's this gay comedian. He points out that until the age of 8, boys and girls cry the same amount. And then after that, boys are told to stop.
Oh, I feel like part of the issue is this idea that they're meant to be resilient. Like, today I read, it surprised me, men commit suicides at a rate of 3 to 1 to women, which is crazy, because it's better to be a dude. You get paid more, you get male privilege, you got the patriarchy on your side, you don't menstruate, like it's good. It's really good. And you've got to ask yourself, why are 3 times more men committing suicide than women? I mean, up until the age of 8 or 9, boys, they cry the same amount as girls, and then they get taught to stop. Like, they're not allowed anymore, and it's ridiculous. And then this fear of looking weak or feminine or looking gay is stopping men from talking about their feelings, and then they kill themselves.
The fact that we need an outlet of expression. For Billy, it's dancing. For Tony, it's his music. And I also thought that it was so very apt that halfway through the scene, in the lowest point of the family, is when Jackie puts an axe to the piano. Not only was it Billy's, his own musical expression, but Tony's absent from that scene. He's not there. It's almost as if he's not important, because the only thing that made sense in Tony's life was music. I don't know, what do you guys think of that?
For me, my understanding of the scene was that he was there was a practical element. They needed firewood because they're so poor. There's that practical, again, socio-political, socio-economical context of the Thatcher era, and the mining culture. They're on strike. They have no income. To me, that was a heartbreaking scene, because if I was Jackie, how hurt would you be to have to chop up your wife's piano? That's really confronting, I think.
You see from his facial expression in that he's visibly upset.
And in order to protect the family, he has to destroy the one thing that he probably cares most about, which is why I think that the jewelry scene, when he's holding the jewelry, it means so much, because it's the last thing.
Yeah.
It's the last thing he has.